Okay, here's the ultimate cultural paradox. Seriously, just think about this for a second.
I'm ready.
Why are we so utterly obsessed with the Illuminati? With secret societies, these, fictional New World Orders, and these ancient shadowy men in cloaks pulling all the strings from some, I don't know, underground bunker.
It's a great question, isn't it? Especially when you realize the people who are actually reshaping our world, I mean, the ones deciding what you see, what you buy, how you talk to your friends.
Silicon Valley billionaires?
Exactly. Venture capital overlords, media moguls, they are completely visible. They're on Twitter or X, whatever, tweeting their manifestos. They're testifying before Congress.
They're launching rockets into space, like every other day. It's all out in the open.
It is. So it's like we're all looking for the ghost in the machine, but the machine itself is standing right there, blinking in neon lights.
Right. So is the real conspiracy just wealth consolidating power, dressed up in glossy rhetoric and a fresh coat of tech paint, hoping we keep looking down the manhole cover instead of up at the CBO's office?
I think that's the core of it.
That's what we're here to figure out today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
So our listener, the learner, and really all of you tuned in to our late night conversation here, sent in a stack of sources that is just, it's wild. This material spans, what, 3 centuries?
At least. It takes us from ancient occult societies and 18th century European propaganda.
All the way to modern antitrust battles and the deeply reactionary roots of today's high-tech wealth.
So our mission today is to fuse these two huge, seemingly unrelated narratives. We're going to trace the history of the grand conspiracy, the architectural symbols, the secrets of Washington, D.C., the whole New World Order thing.
And then we're going to look at the documented, very real, and sort of uncomfortable reactionary foundation of modern tech power.
We're looking for that structural connection. Where does the idea of the hidden imagined conspiracy act as this psychological distraction from the power structure you can actually see and touch?
What happens when we stop looking for Baphomet and start looking at board minutes?
Exactly. Okay, so let's start with where we are now. The pop culture litmus test. What is the Illuminati today? We see that word everywhere.
Oh, everywhere. It's in comment sections, it's in TikTok memes, it's on album covers. You literally cannot mention a powerful person without someone immediately typing Illuminati confirmed in all caps.
It's it.
And if you look at how it's defined now, especially on social media and cultural magazines, one of our sources just calls it a hip-hop marketing tool that gets conspiracy theorists excited.
That's a great line.
It's lost all historical meaning. It's basically just an empty bag,
It's become shorthand for someone rich and famous is hiding something sinister.
Yeah.
And their success must be because of some unnatural hidden contract.
Yes. And think about the recurring, completely debunked rumors around power couples like Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Oh, classic example. Every time Jay-Z makes that hand gesture, the diamond for his record label, Rockefeller.
The comment sections just explode. Or every time Beyonce uses Egyptian-inspired iconography in a music video, for thousands of people, that's it. It's instant confirmation.
It's the only way they can explain how two people got that much power and cultural influence.
It's a fascinating mechanism, isn't it? It takes this historical boogeyman, the idea of a secret cabal, and just applies it instantly to anyone today with wealth and influence. It makes incomprehensible success feel explainable.
But to really get it, we absolutely have to remember the historical context of that boogeyman before we start dissecting the modern power players.
Precisely. We need to understand why the idea of a secret group plotting global control is so sticky in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack that. Part 1, the grand conspiracy. Where did this idea of a global puppet master, the New World Order, actually start? It didn't just pop up on the internet one.
No, not at all. You have to rewind the clock all the way back to 1789, right after the French Revolution.
Right.
The sudden, violent collapse of the French monarch. I mean, this was a seemingly unshakable foundation of European power. It sent shockwaves across the entire continent. The traditional powers, the monarchies, the churches, they needed an explanation for how this chaos could just erupt so quickly and so completely.
And the explanation they landed on became the blueprint for almost every single conspiracy theory that followed, the grand conspiracy theory.
And that theory held that the revolution wasn't, a spontaneous thing because of famine or injustice. No, it was meticulously orchestrated.
By who?
By ruthless atheist plotters operating through the networks of the Freemasons and, crucially, the newly famous or infamous Illuminati. The goal was simple: subvert all religion and all government.
And this narrative wasn't just some rumor. It was amplified, it was popularized, it was locked into the European imagination by two key figures.
Augustin Birrell, a French Jesuit priest, and John Robison, a respected Scottish physicist.
Barul is such a character study in how these theories get built and how they evolve over time. His first argument didn't even really focus on the Illuminati.
Not at all. He initially blamed the philosophers, the Enlightenment writers, with Voltaire as the ringleader.
And this is where it gets so weirdly personal. Why would Voltaire want to smash Christianity and the monarchy?
According to Barul, it was basically just professional jealousy. He argued that Voltaire was deeply, deeply envious of the fame and influence of a much older, revered Christian philosopher, Blaise Pascal.
So a grand international conspiracy to topple civilization was rooted in a bruised ego.
Essentially, yeah. It sounds almost comedic. But then Barul goes even further in his second volume. He needed to explain the Freemasons' role in all this.
And what was his story for them?
An even stranger origin story. He suggested the entire Freemason plot was founded by an ancient slave who cooked up the whole thing to get revenge on the world that had enslaved him.
It's like revenge fantasy meets political theory. It just shows how desperate the establishment was for a simple external villain they could point to.
But at the end of the day, those figures, a jealous philosopher, a vengeful slave, they weren't really dramatic enough to explain the sheer scale and violence of the French Revolution.
That's when the spotlight shifted.
That's when it shifted.
Oh,
Barul, who was being influenced by this increasingly aggressive anti-Illuminist propaganda coming out of Germany, he adopted a new narrative that the actual Bavarian Illuminati were the ruthless, disciplined puppet masters behind it all.
they became the perfect scapegoat.
The perfect scapegoat. Centrally coordinated, hyper-rational, powerful enough to make the other guys look like, as Barul put it, faint imaginations of puerility.
Wow.
They were driven by pure, cold lust for power. Barul even later claimed the Illuminati helped Napoleon capture Malta and were menacing the U.S. by having numerous brethren located in Philadelphia and Boston.
And here is the essential reality check that we have to make. The actual historical Bavarian Illuminati, founded by this guy Adam Weishaupt, it only lasted for about a decade.
A single decade in the 1780s, before the whole group was disbanded and outlawed by the Duke of Bavaria.
And yet, here we are, 2 centuries later, and this defunct little society is still getting blamed for everything from pop star success to global financial crises.
That phantom Illuminati really paved the way for the ultimate fear. The New World Order, the NWO.
Historically, that NWO conspiracism was super niche, right? It was limited to the, militantly anti-government right and Christian fundamentalists who were worried about the Antichrist and a single world government.
The enemy back then during the Cold War was always the Red Menace. All the fears were about crypto-communists plotting this atheistic, bureaucratic, collectivist world government.
Liberals, global institutions, even like progressive education were seen as part of the plot.
But the post-Cold War shift, after the Soviet Union fell, that's what makes the NWO idea so relevant today. The focus moved from communist plotters to globalists.
Which means what exactly?
An untouchable, wealthy oligarchy. International bankers, corporatists, corrupt politicians, all plotting a unified, collectivist world management system.
Yeah, and this new NWO, it needs a way to be implemented. And the fears around that they're expansive and really detailed.
Oh, yeah. They include massive surveillance networks, big brother control through new infrastructure, which is why people get so freaked out about smart city technologies.
And the most persistent, most sinister element, population control.
Always. Believers are terrified this oligarchy is plotting genocides through unnecessary wars or engineered plagues, viruses, tainted vaccines, or even environmental disasters by controlling the weather.
It's this deep-seated fear that the elites just see the rest of us as a problem to be managed and reduced, not people to be governed.
And that's where you see specific policy targets pop up, like United Nations Agenda 21.
Right, which is just a non-binding resolution about sustainable development.
But for NWO theorists, it became this massive target. It was condemned as a plot to reconcentrate people into dense urban areas and deliberately depopulate rural areas with environmental controls.
It's neo-Malthusian alarmism being used to create support for world government. They see the language of sustainability as just cover for central control.
And this paranoia isn't just about, nebulous international groups. Theorists claim it's literally woven into the physical fabric of America itself.
Which brings us to a truly bizarre and, I have to admit, compelling source of data for conspiracy theorists. The idea that the American founding fathers, especially George Washington, wove Masonic sacred geometry and occult designs into the layout of Washington, D.C.
Yes. The central figure here is the French city planner Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. The theory suggests L'Enfant was picked not just for his engineering skills, but because he understood symbolic design. He was just the middleman for plans drawn up by Washington and Jefferson.
Both of whom were known Freemasons.
Exactly. And the layout itself, critics claim, is a giant magical diagram. It's designed to channel specific energies or, pay homage to dark forces. This isn't just random road planning.
No, it's very specific geometry. The most cited example is the complex of streets around the Capitol Rotunda. Theorists claim if you trace the alignments, the Capitol is positioned precisely at a top point of an inverted pentagram.
A pentagram, they say, is symbolic of either Baphomet or the demon Asmodeus. It's the architectural anchor for the city's dark energy. They even claim the street lines form a lattice network of numbers and letters used by Kabbalists for cryptic messages.
We should probably pause and define that. When we say Kabbalists here, we're talking about the esoteric Jewish tradition, which often deals with mystical texts and numbers, right?
Right, and which many occult groups, like the Rosicrucians, that semi-mythical 17th century secret society, later appropriated for their own symbolic language. The theorists believe L'Enfant was using these appropriated Gnostic principles.
And if you connect the 5 key points, the Capitol, the White House, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and the Jefferson Memorial, they supposedly form a geometric alignment that corresponds to solstices and lunar cycles.
Suggesting the entire city is basically a giant sundial or an energy conductor.
And the Washington Monument is central to that whole energy idea. It's the world's largest obelisk, a structure that theorists explicitly link to Freemasonry and ancient Egyptian sun worship.
The theory is super detailed. They believe the sheer pressure of the stacked stones causes the monument to act as a piezoelectric crystal antenna.
Okay, let's unpack that term, piezoelectric crystal. In simple terms, piezoelectricity is the electric charge that builds up in certain materials, like quartz, when you apply mechanical stress, like pressure.
So the theory is that the massive weight of the granite and marble is generating this subtle but powerful electric current. And this current allegedly captures solar energy and transfers it into the ground, making the land fertile and, more sinisterly, empowering the occult forces built into the city.
And there's a bizarre physical detail that believers point to as proof. There's a manhole cover at the base of the monument.
Right. If you lift it, you allegedly find a second, much smaller, obelisk-shaped marker about 15 feet deep in a well shaft.
The official story is that this is a geodetic point used for measuring settlement and seismic activity.
But the conspiracy theory claims it's a negative-charged probe that gathers the electrical discharge from the main obelisk, completing the power circuit. They argue you don't need a deep stone slab to check if a monument is sinking. It's clearly ceremonial.
Well, for challenging the function of symbols like the obelisk, we have to talk about the most notorious piece of symbolic statuary from that era. The George Washington statue carved by Horatio Greenough.
Oh, this is such a wild piece of history. Greenough was commissioned to create an apotheosis, basically the elevation of Washington to divine status.
And he depicted Washington sitting down, kind of like the Roman god Jupiter, but nude to the waist, with just a toga draped over his lap.
And Congress was horrified, absolutely horrified. General Henry Wise famously said, "The man does not live, and never did live, who saw Washington without his shirt." They refused to put it in the rotunda.
But the conspiracy connection isn't about the nudity, it's about the hand gestures.
Exactly. The statue had Washington with one hand pointing up and one hand pointing down. And critics immediately drew parallels.
That seated posture, the draped cloth, and those 2 gestures, one to heaven, one to earth, it almost perfectly matches the 18th century engraving of the Baphomet of Mendes,
which was popularized by occult writers. Baphomet is often depicted in exactly that androgynous seated posture, with the hands symbolizing solve ecoagula, as above, so below.
And the rotunda, where this nude Baphomet-like Washington was supposed to sit, is the top point of that alleged Asmodeus pentagram.
Whether it was intentional or not, the visual similarities are striking. It's enough to deeply reinforce the idea for theorists that the city was planned by adherents of these ancient esoteric philosophies.
So you've got the original grand conspiracy, which started with Voltaire's jealousy and slave revenge plots,
which evolved into a fear of globalist control,
reinforced by solar-powered obelisks and nude Washington statues that look like occult figures. It's a lot. It really shows the enduring power of symbolism.
It does. And this paranoia isn't confined to the past or to the capital. It immediately transfers to any large, complex, and slightly mysterious project, which is why we have to move to part two, where these theories become almost self-aware. The Denver Airport case file.
DIA. The absolute spiritual homeland of modern architectural conspiracy. What's so fascinating here is how the Denver International Airport has totally leaned into the legends.
Their marketing team saw the constant media attention and just embraced it. They put gargoyles and TSA scanners on their social media. They reference Lucifer shooting laser beams, all under the hashtag Den Files.
They're making the conspiracy theory part of their brand identity. It's kind of brilliant, actually. It neutralizes the critique by turning it into a commodity.
Exactly. But let's look at the core claims that started this whole thing, beginning with the biggest piece of evidence, the New World Airport Commission.
The claim is simple, right? NWAC is secret code for NWO New World Order, and that the organization never existed. It was just a phantom name on the opening ceremony plaque, a deliberate slip-up by the planners.
That's the claim. The fact is, the NWAC was real. It was a temporary commission set up just for the airport's opening festivities in 1995.
And we know this for sure.
Oh, yeah. There are 11 boxes of archival documents proving its existence, all held by the Denver Public Library. And the name. It was chosen because they wanted to honor the Czech composer Antonín Dvořák and his famous piece, The New World Symphony.
So the biggest piece of evidence for the whole DIA conspiracy is actually just a beautiful, slightly obscure musical reference and a huge public filing cabinet.
Pretty much.
Okay, next up, the Nazi runway model.
You have to acknowledge the visual resemblance to a swastika. If you look at a stylized satellite map and, selectively ignore some of the outer loops, it can definitely look that way.
But the logistical reason for it is?
It's purely functional. It's all about safety and efficiency. The pinwheel configuration allows multiple runways to operate at the same time, even during heavy crosswinds or bad weather.
And Denver is famous for strong winds.
Notoriously so. So the configuration minimizes downtime by making sure at least one runway is always aligned favorably with the weather. It's about wind shear and safety margins, not world domination.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting for me, because even if the runways are logistical, the art inside is undeniably provocative. Leo Tanguma's controversial murals, they're gone now for a remodel, but the legend persists. They are genuinely disturbing.
Tanguma's work is critical because it forces you to confront difficult truths, which is exactly why conspiracy theorists latch on to the darkest parts and ignore the rest. The murals tell a story, a sequence, but theorists only ever show you the first panel.
Let's walk through them. Panel 1 is the horrors of war. You've got grieving parents, bombed-out buildings, and this massive, faceless soldier in a gas mask impaling a giant white peace dove on his sword. This is the image everyone points to.
The second panel isn't much better. It depicts impending ecological disaster. There are rows of coffins with the dead, including a woman and a child, and you see these massive dead animals in a burning forest. The imagery is designed to shock you.
It's dark, horrific stuff to put in an airport, of all places. But you're saying we have to look at the panels as a whole.
That is the essential context that is always stripped away. The third, central panel, is a scene of global hope and reconciliation. It shows children and people of all races gathered together, embracing. The weapons from the first panel, the swords, the guns, are bundled in flags and are literally being beaten into plowshares.
And the grim soldier from the first panel.
A broken statue of him lies forgotten, covered under the earth. So the theme, taken together, isn't a celebration of war and collapse. It's about humanity overcoming those things. It's a message of hope, but framed by this terrifying realism about the challenges.
I get why that complexity is tough for people who are conditioned to look for hidden evil.
Right. Complexity is the enemy of the conspiracy theorists. They see the dark image, they assign malice, and they ignore the redemption that follows in the next frame.
Then we have the external monument, Lucifer, the demonic horse. This is the 32-foot statue Mustang with its glowing red eyes that greets you when you drive in.
The speculation around the horse is definitely fueled by the tragic backstory. The artist Luis Jimenez was killed when a piece of the sculpture fell on him in his studio in 2006. So people see the statue as cursed.
But if we look at the artist's actual intent, what about the glowing red eyes? That's the proof of its demonic nature, right?
The red eyes, which are just internal light sources, were actually a specific tribute to his father, who was a respected neon sign maker in Texas. It was a stylistic choice rooted in his family history.
And the blue color.
It was modeled after his own favorite horse, Blackjack, a blue roan Appaloosa, which has this distinctive, almost otherworldly blue tint. And his wife said he chose the glowing eyes to show how unfamiliar things can seem frightening, because he was once startled by Blackjack's eyes reflecting light in the dark.
So, safety logistics, dark but hopeful art, a family tribute to neon signs, and a blue roan Appaloosa. All mundane, rational explanations. But that doesn't stop the underground bunker theory.
No, it just shifts the focus deeper underground. The belief in these vast subterranean complexes, secret runways people claim they're 4 or 5 miles long, and deep tunnels for the global elites or the lizard people to ride out the apocalypse.
And here's the link back to the historical NWO fears. The chaotic construction. Theorists claim the constant changing of plans, the shuffling of contractors, the huge cost overruns. That was all deliberate, engineered to hide the project's true size from everyone but the cabal.
It's a perfect example of the human mind trying to process complexity. When things are complex, expensive, and managed poorly, which is just a common reality for massive infrastructure projects, people reach for simple, monolithic explanations.
They prefer the idea of the Illuminati or lizard people to just accepting the boring reality of chaotic management and bureaucratic inertia.
Which is the perfect pivot into part 3, because if we peel back all this historical occult paranoia, we find a very real, very observable power structure in Silicon Valley, one with its own deeply reactionary, expert-driven ideology of control.
Yes. For decades, the tech industry had this glossy facade of being inherently liberal, utopian, and disruptive in a good way. But critics were warning early on, back in the 90s, that the Valley was quietly moving toward techno-fascism.
Michael Malone, a technology journalist, warned specifically that the industry was headed for techno-fascism. And another writer, Polina Borsuk, pointed to the Valley's overwhelming celebration of unlimited male power and wealth as being a little reminiscent of the early celebrants of Eurofascism from the 1930s.
And this reactionary thinking, our sources suggest, wasn't imported. It was rooted in California's own powerful, dark mythologies of extreme masculinity, manifest destiny, and the gold rush.
Exactly. The idea that individual entrepreneurial white men struck it rich, they drove progress, and no government or collective body should ever stand in their way.
And this ideology had a powerful, highly influential evangelist in George Gilder. His 1981 book, Wealth and Poverty, was nicknamed the Bible of the Reagan administration.
Gilder was crucial because he seamlessly integrated his long-held social conservative politics directly into the justification for this new tech wealth. He didn't just write about economics, he wrote about morality and gender roles.
Right, he was an outspoken anti-feminist who argued for restoring traditional gender roles.
And he tied that directly to his economic theories. He claimed federal welfare programs were morally destructive because they destroyed the incentive for men to work. He specifically argued that welfare turned men into cuckolds of the state.
That is some powerful, divisive, and deeply ideological language. How did he translate that into tech evangelism?
He used it to revitalize this fervor for entrepreneurship. In his view, the successful entrepreneur, the heroic individual risk-taker, was the ultimate moral figure, uniquely suited to lead the country. He positioned the entrepreneur as morally superior to the experts in academia or the soft hands of government bureaucrats.
So that provided the perfect ideological cover for trickle-down economics and welfare cuts. Glorify the individual wealth creator, and he turned his attention right to high-tech, calling it the purest expression of this entrepreneurial genius.
And that narrative, which was amplified by huge media outlets like Time magazine, helped legitimize the rapidly accumulating, often untaxed wealth of this new class of tech businessmen. It reinforced this cultural image of the successful founder as a young white man who must be protected from government or social criticism.
And this image, this power structure, had to be aggressively defended, which is where the anti-PC culture war became integral to Silicon Valley's identity. Fighting the PC police, inclusion, diversity, became a leading space for these aggressive, calculated culture war antics.
The reactionary elements became hyper-visible whenever the power and homogeneity of these founders was challenged. The biggest pro-entrepreneur voices were also the biggest anti-diversity, anti-regulation fighters. They saw social justice as just more government overreach.
The ultimate example of this was T.J. Rogers, the CEO of Cypress Semiconductor. His company made microchips, but as one source put it, his most famous product was Rogers himself and his aggressive anti-PC stunts.
He was infamous for his theatrics. He once ran a full-page ad inviting Mikhail Gorbachev to his campus to show him the wonders of capitalism, implying that government regulation was basically communism. When he was challenged about his lack of diversity, he publicly mocked the efforts.
And what's so crucial for our deep dive audience to get here is the economic result of this culture war posturing. Roger's stunts weren't just noise, they were a financial strategy.
They were financial bold. His actions were publicly praised by the chairs of huge firms like Hewlett-Packard and AMD. More importantly, those culture war antics directly resulted in dozens of investors committing to increasing their holdings of Cyprus stock.
So culture war controversy became a financial advantage. It was a signal to conservative capital that this CEO was one of us, fighting back against government and social reform.
It's the ultimate feedback loop. Reactionary fervor validates the founder. That leads to investment hype. The hype leads to huge cash, which then magnifies the founder's power to keep fighting the culture war.
And this leads us directly to technocracy, the purest political expression of this whole expert over politician ideology.
Technocracy Incorporated was founded way back in 1933, and it explicitly framed itself as not a political movement. They even forbade politicians from joining.
Their radical vision was the technate, a single continental landmass governed solely by engineers and technical experts. They wanted to eliminate the price system, money, and politicians entirely.
Their founder, Howard Scott, famously declared, "The engineers and mechanics created this civilization and will eventually dominate it."
This is the historical root of that modern belief we see today, that only functional, competent people should govern. Push aside the lawyers, the academics, the traditional business people, all the categories Gilder warned against.
They believe traditional politics are inefficient, lawyers are corrupt, and only objective, technical metrics should determine how resources are allocated.
And what's so wild here is the direct lineage to modern figures who embody this. Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, wasn't just some follower. He was a technocracy leader in Canada from 1936 to 1941.
That is a deep, foundational ideological root. And Musk himself has talked about wanting to build a Martian technocracy, literally taking this century-old, expert-driven vision and projecting it onto another planet.
That enduring influence shows that this idea that technical expertise should trump democracy and politics is alive and well. It's what drives the Silicon Valley insistence that governments should just step aside for the real problem solvers. This is the real, observable power structure we should be tracking. It's far more tangible than a Baphomet cult or a tunnel network.
It's the open secret society running in plain sight.
So if this homogeneous, expert-driven structure is the reality, how does it actually influence the technology we get and the innovation that's allowed to surface? That brings us to part 4, when innovation is captured.
We might assume that monopolies are bad just because they charge too much, but the data shows something way more concerning. Competition enforcement is actually critical to promoting and unleashing innovation.
Especially when dominant firms are intentionally holding technology back because it threatens their core business.
It seems counterintuitive, right? The very firms we expect to be driving progress are the ones sitting on the most valuable innovations. We assume innovation just sort of happens. But the history of antitrust shows that firms sometimes invent things just to bury them.
Because it would threaten their current profitable revenue stream.
Exactly. Look at historical examples. IBM in the 1960s was facing immense antitrust pressure from the Department of Justice. And that pressure forced IBM to unbundle its software and services from its hardware.
What was the result of that?
That unbundling was a key driver in creating the separate, massive software market that exists today. By forcing IBM to break its monopoly, it allowed countless third-party software companies to flourish, creating way more innovation than IBM ever would have on its own.
And AT&T is an even starker example. They controlled the signal transmission market for decades by influencing regulators, long after their own scientists had created superior technology.
It's shocking. AT&T's own scientists at Bell Labs were creating nearly all of the 20th century's most important signal transmission tech, the transistor, the solar cell, stuff for fiber optics. And AT&T refused to deploy a lot of it. Because deploying those breakthroughs, especially the transistor, would have cannibalized their massive existing infrastructure of vacuum tubes and wires. They held onto power by influencing regulators to preserve their business and avoid disruptive internal change. Innovation capture is a strategy of stasis.
This exact pattern just repeated itself with the large language model, or LLM, breakthrough. The tech behind ChatGPT. We have to go back to 2017. Google invented the transformer architecture.
The transformer architecture is the foundation. It uses something called attention and positional encoding, which lets the model process data in parallel instead of the old sequential way where it had to read one word after the next.
So it's the difference between reading a book word by word and being able to scan the entire book instantly, paying attention only to the key phrases that determine the meaning.
Exactly. And this innovation is massive because it lets you train models on internet-scale data in human-scale time. Suddenly, you can process the entire digital world efficiently.
And Google had the transformer architecture, and they had the other key ingredient, the internet-scale data. By 2018, they had everything they needed, yet they sat on their models, like LaMDA, keeping them internal. Stasis at Google.
And that stasis was because of corporate dominance. They were the search ecosystem. Introducing a completely new paradigm like an LLM threatened their highly profitable search ad revenue model. They were acting just like AT&T, sitting on their own breakthrough.
But then competition arrived, and it was swift. Microsoft-backed OpenAI launched ChatGPT in November 2023, and that created an external competitive vulnerability that Google could not ignore.
And that's when the dam broke. That one competitive threat rapidly accelerated the release of transformer-based models globally, including Google's own, like Gemini. It proves the point. Dominant firms often stifle their own breakthroughs until an external threat forces their hand.
And just a quick insight into LLMs, which is fascinating because it connects back to our theme of patterns, because they're designed to replicate structure and patterns from data, not truly understand meaning. They often hallucinate, producing compelling, grammatically correct, but completely wrong results. They're just mapping the most probable sequence of words.
Finally, let's look at the ultimate gatekeepers of this whole industry. The venture capital ecosystem. We think of VCs as these brave risk takers, but they're also deeply involved in high-tech management. They control resource distribution. They decide which ideas see the light of day.
And the composition of this group is why the critique from Part 3 is so important. The VC ecosystem is incredibly homogeneous. If you look at US-based VC partners with at least one board seat, the demographics are stark. 92% are male, and 72% attended a tiny handful of top universities.
It's a demographically tight-knit group, a literal oligarchy of resource allocation, and their investment strategy confirms this control and risk aversion.
VCs with a long-term focus actually prefer investing in less popular industries and mid-stage ventures, the expansion phase, rather than taking big risks on brand-new, unproven startups.
Right. They also tend to reinvest heavily in their existing portfolios instead of taking a bunch of small bets on new ideas.
So if we define those stages, the seed or early stage is where a truly radical, world-changing idea might appear. The mid-stage or expansion phase is where a proven idea gets the capital to scale up.
And by concentrating funds in that mid-stage, they effectively filter out the most disruptive, genuinely new ideas that might challenge the status quo. They keep resource distribution within a closed, predictable loop.
And this is how a small, demographically tight-knit group effectively controls the pace and direction of technological innovation, choosing which ideas survive and which die. It's the ultimate control mechanism, not through occult rituals, but through spreadsheets and board meetings.
It's interesting, isn't it? We spent all this time tracing the elaborate origins of the pop culture Illuminati, the jealous philosophers, the Baphomet statues, the red-eyed horses, but we ended up discussing a much more visible, yet equally potent power dynamic that controls the flow of money and technology.
The control mechanisms are often visible, they're documented, and they're based on specific ideologies. A reactionary, expert-driven fervor in Silicon Valley, the strategic stifling of innovation by monopolies, and the homogeneous power of VC funding acting as a gatekeeper. These structures are demonstrably writing the rules, not some cabal in a Denver tunnel.
The first grand conspiracy theorists, like Barral, they needed the plotters to be ruthlessly effective. They claimed they assassinated emperors to halt anti-Illuminati work. They projected this ultimate, flawless power onto a secret, unseen enemy.
But if the real deep state is not a demonic cabal, but documented corporate power structures, oligarchies that define themselves against political restraints and consolidate wealth using Gilder's anti-government cover, then we have to ask a final provocative thought.
Is our constant obsessive search for occult symbols and hidden cabals in, like, the street layout of D.C. or the art in the Denver airport, is it simply a psychological projection that distracts us from the very difficult, very necessary work of holding the visibly powerful, the Gilder disciples, the monopoly heads, the VC gatekeepers accountable for the rules they write in plain sight?
Perhaps the ultimate secret society is the one that meets publicly on every earnings call and global summit, convincing us all to look for the lizard people while they redesign the operating system of the world right in front of our faces. Think about that next time you see a blue check mark or hear an ad for a new AI product.